Hi, Ellen.
Hi,
Hi. It's so great to be talking with you today.
thank you. You too, and everybody else.
Yeah,
Hi.
yeah. Thank you for joining us. Don't know whether it's best to wait a second or just get started.
Um, should we wait a couple of minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah. If anyone is there, you can take the poll whilst you're waiting, just to kind of gauge. If you've never heard of Psychologies or me, that's completely fine, but just to kind of gauge when I'm talking.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly what the session is for, to introduce Psychologies and Ellen. And yeah, as Ellen said earlier, there's a poll as well. So yeah, take the poll in the meantime, and then we'll get started in a second. I guess I'll introduce myself whilst we wait for some people to arrive. So my name's Megan Stillwell. I am 23 and I'm from Derbyshire. And I am a digital marketing self-starter and a young climate activist. Like most of you here, I guess, I'm on a mission to create a greener and fairer planet. And I'd like to do that by using communication to raise awareness about global issues. So the reason that I'm here today is because Savita could not bring herself to invite another one of the usual suspects to chair the session today. She wanted to see a fresh face on the screen, so she invited Catalyze Change, a wonderful social enterprise, to ask one of the young female activists that they work with and support if they would like to speak. So absolutely honoured to have been asked to do the role and to represent the network of young women in sustainability. And also, I just absolutely hope that I'll see more young women and young people in the future like this. I feel like we've got lots to say, and it's great to have some fresh perspectives. So, Ellen, are you happy to kick start, really?
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to introduce Ellen Tout today. She is the Eco Living editor from Psychologies magazine, and she will be talking to us about how she brings environmental issues to a mainstream audience. So, Ellen, you're going to do a much better job of introducing yourself. So please take it away.
Hi. Thank you. It's lovely to be chatting to you, and I think it's so brilliant that they've chosen somebody different to do the talk, and yeah, you've been brilliant so far. So I'm a freelance journalist and writer. I work mainly for Psychologies magazine. I'll look at the poll in a minute, so I don't know if you've heard of it, but this is the magazine. We're the UK's biggest mindful living magazine, so we've always written about topics like mental health, well-being, mindfulness, a long time before they were in mainstream conversations. But we're considered a glossy magazine, so we're quite different from a lot of magazines like that. So we're kind of sit with other glossy magazines, but we like to focus on how you feel and rather than just how you look. So I think as a journalist, I realised quite early on that I wanted to write about topics that I really cared about and that kind of made a difference, which was why I started working for Psychologies. I've been there about 5 years now, and it would be 2.5, 3 years ago, I started writing about sustainability for them. That came about because I was doing it in my own life, and I was kind of, as a journalist, I try to write about things that I care about, but also things that, that I'm living. So often for mental health topics, we talk about what we've all got going on in our own lives in the team. So I'd gone vegan. I'd been veggie for years, but I'd gone vegan and I was trying to reduce waste, getting active in climate change groups and stuff like that locally. And I felt that, we're meant to be a mindful living magazine. We promote kindness and stuff like that. So it should be kindness to the planet as well. So I started initially just writing a one-page column, which was about my own experiences and the things I was doing in my daily life, just little things like how to use less plastic in the bathroom, things like that. and we got really great feedback. So the page is kind of expanded and expanded from there. Yeah, and I'm still writing the column now. Now it kind of has a question and answer format. So it's readers and colleagues and, you know, questions that I'll be thinking about. I then answer them, and I try to go at it from a really approachable angle, but still giving it really robust statistics and not just writing about it in a kind of greenwashy, tokenistic way. So yeah, I try to make it empowering but accessible, because we're a magazine that write about lots of topics, not purely sustainability. So a reader could be really passionate about it like me, or they could have just picked up the magazine and happened to flick to the page. I've bookmarked a couple of my columns, so there's...
I think it's so fantastic that there is a want for environmental issues to be spoken about in a mainstream magazine, because I don't even think there was an awareness of the need for that now. It's so great that you started off with this little column and it's grown and people are actually, you know, interested in it. And it's just, yeah, it's fantastic to hear. And I think you're so right. It's really important, if you're speaking about mindfulness, to be mindful of your individual actions and in such a broader, kind of more holistic view.
Yeah.
I just think that's fantastic.
Thank you. I think it kind of started as me being really passionate about it and convincing the editor to let me write about it, and it just kind of grew from there. And I think, you know, if you think 3 years ago, the media were talking about the climate crisis and stuff like this a lot less, and it kind of, I got into it at the right time, that it grew from there, and that there was a lot more demand for it.
Yeah. I should say, by the way, to the people in the chat, I've just got a question. Actually, I was going to say, please add your questions to the chat. I have some questions to ask Ellen myself, but I would like to get through yours too. So Lucy Erickson, I'm going to go straight in here, said, do you accept pitches for ideas or new climate or environmental research to cover? Do you?
Yes. It kind of depends if you're a writer or if you're representing an organisation. So I'm always really, really open to research and stuff like that being sent over to me. So you can always send that to my Psychologies email, which is on our website. We do accept pitches from new writers and established writers, more so for the magazine as a whole, because the eco section is still between 1 and 5 pages, depending on the month. So a lot of it is just written by me for budget reasons, but we also have our website, which has a big eco section on. So there's always the opportunity for people to write stuff on there. So yeah, I'd say if anyone ever has like a fresh angle on something, or also a personal story, is always really nice. You know, we had someone who wrote about eco-anxiety, and I think she lived in Scotland and had written a play about it, and she kind of wrote a big feature about her story of how she came to do that and how the local community reacted to it. So it's, yeah, personal stories are always lovely, but also research is really, really great, especially if they're statistics that can be kind of accessible to a more mainstream reader. So something that's kind of quantifiable and that they can understand. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Well, hopefully, yeah. I think that answered the question, but Lucy, let us know if you've got any more questions from that. I was just going to say, so how, when you're picking statistics, for example, do you go for more kind of like optimistic statistics, or a mixture of kind of like, you know, like the horror factor? What do you think works best?
I always spend a lot of time kind of reading research and choosing what statistics I'm going to pick. I think I don't want to dumb it down, and I don't want to kind of, I know, only pick the positives, but also I try to make it, I suppose, inspiring in a way, even if you are talking about quite a, you know, what can be an upsetting topic or a challenging topic. So I think I try to, I'll pick the best statistics and ones that, you know, readers can understand, but then I'll try to follow that up. So often I'll start my column with kind of the hard news statistics, and then I'll go into a bit more depth about it, and then kind of finish with it with actionable points that people can go and take away and actually do something. And I think that's what's worked well. You know, the statistics, we'll often see them in the news, but there's not always that much kind of about what you can then go and do. So I guess I want to give more hope, and that's kind of the feedback that I've got from readers, is people that have got in touch have said, you know, I've gone and spoken to my friends about this, or I've gone and I've done this. And I think that's so rewarding. You know, if one reader's emailed in and they've actually done it, then that kind of makes it worth it. And I think if you get one person say that, hopefully that's reflective of more people connecting to it and actually doing something. So yeah, I always try to put, you know, active things that they can go and do in there as well in relation to it.
So we've got another question from Helen here, and that's she says that could you give some insight into who your readers are and a bit more detail on your reach or circulation?
Okay, testing my numbers. So we're the UK's biggest mindful living magazine. Our readers are quite varied. It is mainly women, but we do, I'd say maybe 70% women. We're quite a big age range. We start kind of in their 20s and go up to 50s. We find we have a lot of people, it's kind of like people in their 20s and then in their 40s and 50s. It's a weird, whilst it is everyone, they're kind of our core readers are kind of spread out, which is a bit weird. A lot of people are business women. We have a lot of life coaches, therapists, people like that read the magazine. And a lot of people that have founded their own business kind of love us. Circulation, we're around 180,000 a month, and we're 13 issues a year. 180 is the readership. I can't remember the exact circulation, sorry.
Well, I'm sure that, I think that was a great answer anyway. You've definitely given us an idea of kind of your audience and the reach there. It's amazing that such a magazine with such a large reach, and I had heard of Psychologies before doing this conversation with you, Ellen, and I recognise that it's a mainstream magazine. I remember saying to my mum, "Oh, Psychologies," and she was like, "Oh yeah, I know the one." It's just so great that you've managed to bring environmentalism into a magazine that people already loved and read, because it can be quite inaccessible, and so I think it's fantastic. We've got another question from Melissa. So, where do you look for your statistics? Is it from what is sent to you, or do you rely on a particular resource?
Okay. And most journalists get this. You get sent press releases, probably hundreds every day, and a lot of them are not useful. So I try to go for credible sources. I think maybe because we are a mainstream publication, I don't necessarily get contacted by kind of the credible sources that much, so I actively go out and find them myself. So I'll go to people like Greenpeace or Friends of the Earth or Wildlife Trust and look at the reports that they've been doing. It would be amazing if they were sent to me. I think there's definitely a lot more awareness of the column now, but maybe because of the name of the magazine and kind of what we've traditionally written about, maybe organisations have not yet kind of thought of us as the go-to place. So it's a bit of both.
So fingers crossed, maybe after this conversation we'll get a bit more traction. That'd be fantastic.
I think actually, Twitter as well, I just thought is really useful. I follow a lot of people on there, and often I'll be kind of browsing for my own Twitter, and I'll come across things. So that I think that's really useful as a journalist, as a tool.
We've got another question from Marianne, but I'm just going to quickly slip one of my own in there. I wondered, when you're looking at what content to include, is there some content that you avoid? Is there kind of a side of environmentalism that you think doesn't really engage your readers? And similarly, is there some content that you kind of steer towards?
I'm very lucky, I think, that my editor, it kind of gives me free rein on the column on what I think we should be writing about. I guess I try to write about it, even when it's the tougher topics, in a way that can be kind of a positive spin, because of the magazine that we are, even if it's just, you know, the reality, but giving those kind of actionable things to make it more positive. I don't think there's any topics that I've kind of steered away from. Maybe it's more that angle that I take on them. So I've written about, so the examples that I've grabbed, this one is about green recovery. And then I've got, so this one was a question from a reader, and it's about, I'm avoiding eating meat, but I've got some old leather bags and shoes. Like, should I throw them away? What's the ethical thing? So it can be, you know, smaller questions like that you might be talking to your friends about and think, you know, I don't know. And then this one was about how you can use your pension as a force for good, which I think is something that a lot of people don't realise. I mean, I'm a words person, so the idea of changing over to an ethical pension provider just completely went over my head. So yeah, I like to kind of take topics that are maybe, you know, maybe the reader hadn't thought of, particularly ones like that, and that, you know, switching to a green pension provider can make such a huge difference. And I think I'm quite lucky that I can write about stuff like that in a magazine that is, you know, a lifestyle mainstream type magazine.
That's fantastic. Switching your bank, your pension, anything to a green provider is so important, and definitely something that not many people know about. So the question from Marianne is, what sort of impact has the column had, and do you get a feeling that people are more involved or, you know, changing behaviours because of the magazine? I guess you kind of answered this when you said that you get some messages from the readers to say that they'd, you know, done one of the actions that you suggested, which I thought was fantastic. But can you expand on that bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's always really hard with magazines to measure who has read what. I mean, we've got a lot of my columns run online as well, so that is, you know, a lot easier to track. In terms of the magazine, we run surveys and stuff like that to see what readers think, but a lot of it comes down to people getting in touch. And you know, sometimes you can be writing things and you think, I put my heart into that piece, and you don't hear anything. But for my column, it's been lovely that I have had feedback, and some from organisations like Today, who have got in touch and asked me to do something off the back of it, which is always amazing to be asked. And then also from readers on social media and to our general magazine's email address. When they've got in touch, and think of some examples. The green recovery one that I mentioned, someone emailed me and said, you know, I've been doing so much in my life to try and make a difference, and I felt a bit stagnant and there wasn't anything I could do. And off the back of that, they'd gone and contacted their MP and got involved in local groups. So I think, you know, if I'm inspiring someone to make some changes and then to talk to people about it as well. So I've written a lot about plastic-free period products as a topic that I just think is so important, because, you know, it affects period poverty, it affects the planet, it affects your health. So I've written a lot about that, and I had readers get in touch off the back of that one, especially people saying, you know, they're a mum and their daughter's just started their period and now they're going to use my column to talk to them about it. And I think it's really flattering.
That's so fantastic. And I love that. I love that it's you connected like a family there as well, being able to, having a child and being able to talk to them about something that is quite, you know, taboo, isn't it? Which is a real shame. But you've got to put it in this mainstream lifestyle magazine, and not only that, you've made it sustainable. That's absolutely fab. I really like that. So this isn't a question, I don't believe, but Emily James has said that she'll send you some Woodland Trust reports and research when they come out. She's got some on wellbeing and access to woods soon. So that's great.
Thanks, Emily, that would be amazing.
So do you think that there is more environmentally focused content being, like, your editors accepting more, and do they ask for more? How does that work? But in general, they're allowing you a free reign, which is fantastic. I really like that, because I imagine that this isn't how they've always been, and they're kind of changing with the times. Would you say that you're getting more content accepted and published by the editor?
Yeah, I think we used to focus a lot when I first started the magazine on natural beauty products and stuff like that, and that was kind of the extent of it. And I think for me, I always thought, oh, those pages are a bit boring. They're not really, you know, I don't care about beauty products. And then when we started kind of writing my column, those pages then completely changed as well. So now we will only feature things mainly that are plastic free or are vegan or don't have palm oil, you know, all things ethically made, fair trade. So I think it's had a knock-on effect on other pages in the magazine. Yeah, I think my editor's very open to expanding on it. So yeah, I'm quite lucky. I mean, the website, it's unlimited space. I suppose the thing with a magazine is that we're limited to a certain amount of pages, but it's definitely growing. And yeah.
That's wonderful. That's so wonderful that you've managed to influence the rest of the magazine. Go, Ellen.
Yeah.
Keep pushing for more environmentalism. So I guess earlier you mentioned, right at the start, you mentioned a bit about how the magazine focuses on mindfulness and things, but eco-anxiety is such a kind of, I don't know, a buzzword at the moment, definitely in our sector in sustainability. How do you feel? Do you feel like communication and the media has a role to play in, like, tackling eco-anxiety? And is it something that perhaps you have faced? I know that I face it every day, just thinking, you know, even just little things, like you just walk past somewhere and you see some litter on the floor and it just fills you with this dread, like, oh, all of the work that I'm doing is wasted by this one person who's just littering all the time. Is it something that you face, and do you think you can combat it or help to tackle it through the media?
Yeah, I think, you know, this year especially, it's been so tough for so many people. And I think it's kind of, now people are really starting to wake up to the climate crisis a lot more because of COVID. So I think, you know, there's a lot of people, you know, even writing about it, I've kind of, you know, sometimes you do just think, like, what are we going to do, you know? But I think kind of writing about mental health, when we're writing about anxiety, we'll say, you know, things like it will pass, or, you know, tools to rationalize your thoughts, meditation and mindfulness and things like that. But obviously when it comes to eco-anxiety, you can't necessarily say those things, because it's not just going to pass and you can't sort of weather the storm, for want of a better phrase. So I think when I've spoken to experts, so I grabbed this book, I don't know if you can see it, it's a really, really great book, and it's written by a psychologist, and she's saying, you know, you kind of have to accept those feelings, whereas often the idea of mindfulness is sitting with it and then letting it go, whereas this isn't something that's that case. So I think for me, writing about it is so helpful. It's kind of a tool for me to kind of, you know, to make a difference and to be, oh, sorry, that she missed the book. It's called A Guide to Eco-Anxiety, How to Protect the Planet and Your Mental Health. And it's published by Watkins, who are really brilliant publishers with a few mindful living and well-being books. Because I think as a journalist, you get sent so many things that can be quite greenwashy, and I really try, you know, I'm not an expert, I'm someone who's over the last few years learned about it myself. My background is journalism, but I try to, you know, to do things that are real and that are not just kind of greenwashy stuff. So that book really stood out for me because she's written about it in a way that's so honest, but also giving really practical tools and saying, you know what, your feelings are completely justified. Yeah, but I think for me, writing about it is so important, and going out and doing things, you know, it can be frustrating. Like this weekend, I'm going to go and do a creek clean with my local Friends of the Earth group. I think little things like that can make a difference, and kind of sharing that with the reader, I think, is really powerful.
I bet it's quite cathartic to be doing that and getting kind of the feeling out on the page and know that you're also helping others. I can imagine that feels really good.
I think this year during the height of lockdown, I got my first book deal, which is out next year. It's amazing, but it's also such a weird time to have something like that happen. And it is in the sustainability field. So I think in a way, spending that period of the year just writing was really cathartic, and you know, knowing that I'm doing something that will hopefully give people a bit more tools and information and inspiration to do something as well.
Well, I've definitely got to read the book that you just showed me. But also, you know, can you give us a hint to what your book is about, or a title? Or
yeah, so it's out next year, so it's still a working title. It's about low waste cooking, and from a vegan perspective, which is completely different to what I've written about before, but also in the sustainability field. And I came up with the idea because I love to cook, and I try to reduce waste as much as possible. But I realised so many books like this, they're from the perspective of if you eat meat or dairy, which I don't, and it's, you know, it's fine if people do, but it's frustrating when books are about stuff like that. It's, you know, cooking with leftover chicken bones, or, you know, using the white of the egg when you've put the yolk in a cake, or, you know, using the end of your cheese, which just isn't relevant. So it's, yeah.
I feel that I've recently become vegan as well, and I've got a little vegan blog which I've started. I'm really enjoying it, but yeah, I found the same thing about waste, how it's often using things like the bones, and it's really important, because if you are going to eat meat and cheese and dairy, etc., you do need to be just as frugal as everyone else, and there's so much that you can use. But it would be great. I'd be really interested in your work. I did see the other day, it's a bit off topic, but I did see that Nigella Lawson did and she has that new cooking program, and she did curry with banana skins. So it's something I'm going to try.
Yeah, I did see that, and actually banana skins are so tasty, you'd be surprised.
I've got them in the freezer ready to go. But, moving back to the magazine, because I'm sure we could also do a separate cooking session if we had time. But I was going to ask, when you're speaking, do you kind of writing in the magazine to your readers, do you kind of write in a campaigning way, or do you find that you kind of have to suggest? You can't push too much, because the magazine isn't, it's not that dedicated to environmentalism. So do you feel that it's more of like a suggestion, or can you campaign?
So I think I was thinking about this earlier. I subscribe to magazines like Permaculture magazine, I love, and I think their reader base, you're so invested in that already. You go there to read about that, but with Psychologies, they're reading the magazine as a whole, and it's a smaller section. So I think you do have to write about it in a different way. It's not, which I think can be a good thing and a bad thing, because it can help to bring in new people who might not already be engaged in it. But I try to write about it kind of completely forgotten what question you asked now and gone off on a tangent.
I think you're answering it anyway. About how you have to write differently, and I guess it kind of relates to, I was going to ask a really similar question, because you don't just write for Psychologies, you write for a few different companies, and you also write your own book now, so great. But so you work for kind of like a more sustainable company. You have some more sustainable work than Psychologies, not in the content, but is that true that you have did you work for
Trade,
charity?
Trade. So because I'm freelance, Psychologies is the majority of my work, but I write for various different publications. I'm I love walking and stuff like that, so I've written for outdoorsy magazines and that kind of thing. And yeah, so I do some writing for Trade, which, if you don't know them, they're a really brilliant charity.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, they are all about sustainable fashion, but in that they directly divert clothing from going to landfill, and repurpose it and sell it. They've got shops all over London. I'm not in London, I'm in Kent, but they also have an eBay page, and they work with schools, and that was part of what I worked on with them, producing resources for that and their newsletter. So they work directly with teachers in the schools that want to educate about sustainability, but don't necessarily have the information or the time to kind of write their own lesson plans. So they produce materials and brilliant things for them. Yeah, they're an amazing charity. So being freelance, I'm lucky that I get to write for other things like that. And I've also been doing writing for my local Friends of the Earth, which is really nice.
So I imagine your tone is quite different between Psychologies, Trade, and Friends of the Earth.
Yeah.
How do you manage that, and how do you adapt your writing for the Psychologies mainstream audience?
Yeah, I suppose I'll often write it and then read through it again and try to, whatever the publication is, think of myself as the reader who, you know, for Psychologies, perhaps they have zero knowledge about this specific topic to begin with, and I'll try to read it as if I'm them. Whereas for Trade, for example, especially for teachers, I kind of would assume a higher level of kind of understanding already of the topic and angle it in that way. But I think with my writing in general, I always try to write in quite an accessible way. I don't think there's any point in using overly fancy language and stuff like that if it's just going to turn people off. I mean, one of the Instagram sessions yesterday, I think she was saying that she tries to gauge her level of language at kind of 9 to 11 years, which I'd never thought about it like that before. I think you sort of have to, you know, never assume too much of the reader, but also give them some justice. But I try to write as if someone was reading it for the first time and didn't know about these things.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. So I'm going to go back to your book. So I missed a question from that, but you've got lots of people saying that they're really excited about your book, so that's fantastic.
Thank you.
Loving the support for Ellen here. Camilla, sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. I just had a bit of a funny moment there, but I'm just going to read the questions. You said, did you pitch your idea to a publisher, or were you approached?
Okay, it actually came about quite a weird way. So I'd been writing my column for about a year, and an agent. So how it works with publishing is you have the publishers and then you have the agent that represent the writers. And normally the agent, as a writer, you'll pitch to the agent and then they pitch to the publishers. But the agent had been reading Psychologies and read my column and really liked it. So we met up and she suggested that I write kind of a general eco-living guide off the back of my column. So a proposal is generally, I think it was about 20,000 words. So I put all of that together for the book. And this was kind of just before so many people in the media were talking about sustainability. So my proposal went in, and then I think it was around the time of Extinction Rebellion really kicking off, and that kind of became so mainstream that there were so many people talking about it that actually that proposal didn't get accepted by any publishers. And I thought, oh, you know what, I'm just going to focus on journalism. And then this idea kept cropping up for the food book because I wanted something like that myself. And I thought, no one's writing about it from this angle. And I happened to see a tweet from a publisher at Watkins saying they were looking for new authors in sustainability and well-being, and literally randomly one evening scrolling, and I sent her the idea and she loved it, and it went from there. So it's a really unusual route into publishing. When you speak to most people, it's they contacted an agent, they contacted the publishers, they got a deal. So yeah, that's how it came about. Yeah, and that's
fantastic, Ellen. That's really great. So I'm aware that we've got 10 minutes left. So I had a couple of questions about, so your Psychologies is a glossy magazine, which you described earlier. Do you think there's kind of a future for print journalism and specifically kind of glossy magazines, a sustainable future? Where's it going?
I guess, I mean, when I got into journalism, people said there's not going to be printed products anymore. And that was, I don't know how long ago. Oh, no. And I think people like to have something tangible. You know, we've got Kindles, but people still buy books. So I think, like, I think holding something in your hands, people really like that. And in a way, especially when I'm writing about topics like this, I think if you're reading it on a website or on an iPad or something, you know, you might just kind of scroll through and not really connect with it. Whereas I think being in print, people will engage with it a lot more. And yeah, we're quite lucky that our subscribers are very loyal. So people buy on the newsstand as well, but our subscribers have kind of kept us ticking over, especially this year. So yeah, but I think obviously there is an impact of a printed material, but there's an impact of putting something online or on an iPad as well. So we've for about a year now, our packaging's been plastic free, which a lot of magazines still aren't. So yeah, I'm quite pleased about that, because that just didn't feel right that people were subscribing and then being sent this magazine where I was writing about these topics. And then it's coming in a plastic bag. You know, there's so many magazines that still do that. So yeah, that kind of I think that makes a small bit of difference. I think as well, our magazine, people tend to keep them for so long. So it's not like a magazine that you grab and then throw away. We love making like vision boards and keeping them. And we get so many emails from people who've got these boxes full of magazines that they go back to. Because I think some magazines, you know, I don't know, like a celebrity type magazine, you'll read them and then it's old news the next day, whereas these people will keep them for years and years and the content is still relevant in a way. The
advice doesn't age as much as the celebrity news.
Yeah,
we've got the comments here saying that they've got magazines from 2002 and a stack of magazines that they just can't part with. Yeah, it is true, isn't it? And I feel like sometimes environmentalism and the whole topic of sustainability, that kind of broad word, it can be quite hard for it to feel tangible. And you know, if you've got it written right in front of you, all of this advice is just fantastic, as you say. It kind of stops you, and the reader will be much more likely to actually spend some time on it.
I hope.
Yeah, I hope. Well, it seems like it's working. It seems like you're doing a fab job. I was going to ask more. It's a bit more relevant, I guess, in relation to the pandemic. So, do you think that the current crisis has put the climate crisis into perspective for your readers? Do you think that people are more engaged in it because of the pandemic? You know, because I've found that some of the people I've spoken to, they've kind of felt like this crisis is so tangible and so present, that because sometimes the climate crisis just feels like a million miles away. You know, it's not going to affect me, it's going to affect my grandchildren, not me personally. I don't have grandchildren, but you know, it feels years away, and people don't always understand it. But I think that the pandemic has kind of put it into perspective for some people. Would you say that that's true? Do you think your readers are going to be more engaged with it at the moment?
Yeah, I think definitely it's put it into perspective a lot more, and it's made it feel a lot more real and like it is on our doorstep. It's not something that's just overseas or that isn't relevant to us. I think since the pandemic, I've tried to kind of tweak the type of topics I'm writing about, to kind of, even because I think a lot of people still haven't quite made the connection. Probably a lot of our readers have, but yeah, so I've tried to kind of tweak the content to, you know, subtly. So one that I wrote recently about green recovery, I wrote a lot about, I can't remember his name, but I'd read about him in Permaculture magazine, and he'd done the most amazing studies where he'd written about if people went into a room and sat down and they were like, what do you want the future to be like? Nobody described, you know, computers and commuting and stuff like that. And his research showed that, in a way, during the pandemic, as terrible as it has been, people weren't traveling, and you saw cities where nature was coming back a little bit and things like that. So I tried to take that angle on it of like, maybe this is the kind of world that you want to see, and actually this is why it's so important that we act right now. If that makes sense, trying to kind of make it relatable to the reader.
It definitely makes sense, and I think a few people have been trying to do the same. I saw a YouGov survey in the start of the first lockdown, where they'd ask people if they noticed differences in during the pandemic, and people had just kind of been appreciating the fresh air because there were less cars, there was less pollution, and seeing the wildlife that they hadn't seen before, and being more connected with the community around them. And I felt really empowered by it and inspired to kind of continue to work in sustainability and to promote these positive messages. And I think the work that you're doing is so important in a mainstream magazine. I think it really needs to be a topic that we're discussing. And it's easy because people might just, I feel like some journalists in sustainability, they might just go straight to a sustainable magazine, but then you're preaching to the converted, aren't you? And you're out there spreading the message and engaging potentially the unengaged. And I just think that's really important.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we're in the last 5 minutes now. So if anyone has any more questions for Ellen, then 3 minutes now, I see. If anyone has any more questions for Ellen, then please do pop them in the chat. I'm trying to look at my sheets to see what questions I have, because I think we've managed to get through nearly all 16 of them, Ellen. Thank you. We've done quite good to get through them all.
That felt like it went quite quickly. I see a few people have posted resources and stuff like that in the chat, so thank you. I guess I'll be able to look through them after we've finished. I'll definitely do that.
Thank you so much for sharing and for the support. It's great to see so many of you coming to this session. So thank you for that. And I'm going to see if I can find one question to finish off with.
Okay.
If I can. I guess this one. Have you done any other environmental communication conferences this year, or environmental conferences in general, or is this your first one?
This is the first one that I've spoken at. So yeah, I think, I've really enjoyed it. It's actually gone really quickly, the session. I loved some of the sessions yesterday. I was watching them, especially the one on intersectionality. I thought that was so interesting and so important at the moment. And yeah, I think this year maybe a lot of people are doing a lot more online. So I've spoken at things like that, but not, specifically for environmentalists. I tend to take part in things that are for journalists and other writers. So it's really nice to have a slightly different angle on it. And I've learned so much from the other sessions. Yeah,
it's fantastic. This is my first communicate as well. I've not, and my first interview session, but it's fantastic to have a mainstream magazine here. It's been really interesting to hear from you. I hope everyone else has enjoyed it. It seems like some people have, so that's fab. I'm just, Ellen, honoured to speak to you today.
Thank you.
I know that sounds really intense, but I really am. It's just been really interesting. And great to hear from you. So thank you very much.
Thank you. You've been wonderful first interview. And thank you to everyone for all the comments and support and stuff. That was so nice to read.
Yeah, and if there are any more questions, then put them in the chat and we can see if we can get round to answering them at another time. So yeah, that would be great. So thank you, Ellen.
Thank you. As well, if anyone does think of anything else, you're more than welcome to message me on Twitter or email me. So it'd be great to hear from all of you. Okay, thank you everybody then. Something else.
Have a good conference.